start off here with a quote. The movie opens with Philip Marshall's voice saying, "The piece that I'm providing for everyone is how they executed the attack, who executed it, and all these other people that are circling around it. That's why I wrote the book, so they could take that piece and put it in and continue with it." Eric, why did you decide to put this quote at the beginning of the movie?
Well, I've been a 9/11 truther for quite a while. I spent a bunch of time working with architects and engineers locally here in Portland. It's really difficult getting a lot of people sort of engaged all at the same time. My experience was that, in a period of a year, maybe we'd put on 4 or 5 screenings of experts speak out at a museum or a library, and a handful of people would come, and maybe half of them would sign the petition to call for a new investigation. And I found it really frustrating in that so many people seem to buy the mainstream story, and find it very uncomfortable to engage in anything but that. Of course, I know that's not true. I know that there's probably 50% of the American public believe that there's something more than the 9/11 Commission report. So I wanted to make a film that would, hopefully engage people who hadn't done a lot of research and investigating.
Our next question is, why did you make this movie, and has there been any backlash for doing so?
Any backlash? Wow. Well, yeah, there have. I opened it at the Quad Cinema in Manhattan on April 11th. Ran there for a week. And the reason for opening in New York is because anything that runs for a week or longer in the 4 boroughs gets reviewed by the New York Times and the Village Voice and so forth. And we pretty much got trashed by the mainstream media, which, wasn't all that surprising. I pretty much expected, to get beat up. But the positive thing about that was, that they did say a few words, and we got a lot of buzz out of it, and we got coverage on a lot of movie websites, like Rotten Tomatoes and so forth, which is always good, because when people go looking to see a movie, they the more places it turns up, the more eager they are to see it. Why I made it is basically because the mainstream media didn't cover it at all, and I thought it was the Phil Marshall story that did come out was pretty terrifying in the way they portrayed him. The papers and the sheriff just really went at Marshall, characterizing him as a psychopath and a guy who was dependent on drugs and who was unstable and a wife beater, and all these awful things. But in fact, he was a very thoughtful guy. He was a very thorough researcher. He was one of the few people who was really able to kind of look into the people, organizations, and events that took place behind the scenes of the 9/11 attacks, and he put it into a very readable form, and in 3 books. So, this is a guy that I really wanted to celebrate, because he's that courageous. to stand up to tremendous power.
Yeah, I agree. How has the response been to the film?
Well, not all that many people have seen it. We had a couple hundred people in New York. If you believe the YouTube numbers, we had 15,000 people who saw it in a week online. I don't know how accurate that number is. I think it may not reflect the real number. Anyway, it's now on Vimeo on demand, and there's links to it from the film website, which is actually a blog, unthinkable-movie.com. And people are starting to come there and take a look and like it, and I'm hopeful that over the next 6 months to a year that we'll actually make a dent in the number of people who are familiar with Phil Marshall and his story.
Great, great. Now, the movie is also based on the investigative research of Wayne Madsen, whose voice is heard throughout the film, along with Alex Jones and Kevin Barrett. How much research went into the film?
Well, I read Wayne's reports, and I read the sheriff's reports and summaries, and basically those were enough for me, as a screenwriter, to flesh out the film as you see it today.
All right, Eric, how long did it take you to make this film?
Well, I made it. It took a couple of months to write the script and do all the breakdowns and so forth, and get it cast. Maybe that was 3 months, and we shot it in 20 days, starting in October of last year, and we had a cast and crew screening February 29th.
All right, the film hints that Marshall may have been a victim of the Patriot Act. What's your view on 9/11 and the Patriot Act?
I don't know if my view makes any difference, to tell you the truth. I'll tell you what, Wayne Madsen wrote for a period of a couple of months, but nine different reports, and he started out, with the basic facts and worked his way through a lot of the possibilities and followed a lot of the branches where they seem to lead most directly. And the final thing that he said in his last report that was directly about the Phil Marshall murders was, the man who is the chief suspect in the death of Phil Marshall and his children is L. Jadi John Brennan, the director of the U.S. Central Intelligence Agency. That's according to Wayne Madsen.
Wow.
Yep.
So that's saying that he was basically hit.
Yeah. Yep.
Oh, that's crazy. Yeah.
Yep. No reservations about it.
Wow.
How you prove it, that's something entirely different. But I think Greg, you've spent some time in Murphy's looking at this also, yes?
Yes, sir. Yes, I have.
I have not. So all I can talk about is what Wayne wrote, and the several conversations I've had with Phil Marshall's sister, and I find it really interesting that that there's such divergent points of view on it. But then again, I know a lot of people that work in the defense industries. They generally don't want to ever touch 9/11 questions because if they did, they might stop being employed. So, right.
Murphy's is a very strange place. I don't know. I don't know if you'd want to go there if you ever got the chance to. But
well, Wayne was saying that the chief of police there is is a kind of a radical neocon Republican who had a lot of issues with Phil Marshall.
Really?
Yeah.
Interesting. Gary Kuntz? Is that the...
Gary Kuntz, yeah.
Yeah.
We don't touch on Gary Kuntz in the film. It's, Dan Hewitt is the character's name in the film is Sergeant DeWitt.
DeWitt,
who
I like that.
I love. I mean, as an actor, Drew Barrios does a great job.
He's awesome.
Portraying Sergeant DeWitt.
Yeah, actually, you had some great casting in that film. How did you get that accomplished?
Well, we were very lucky. Portland is the home to a couple of TV series, Leverage and Grimm, and a big theater scene, big music scene, and we have a lot of very talented people. And the last film I made before Unthinkable was a piece about PTSD, and one of the actresses who had a major role in that, Katherine Johnson, is real active in the indie film scene in Portland. And when I showed her the script, she asked me, would you like me to share it with a few people that I know? And she literally brought 9 out of 10 of the actors in the film to the piece.
Wow!
So we were pretty lucky that way.
And that was the Purple Mind?
Purple Mind, yeah.
Purple Mind, okay, very good. Early in the film, Eric, Marshall Phillips speaks to a friend about the SEAL Team accidents.
Right.
Do you think SEAL Team 6 killed Osama bin Laden?
I used to. But there's a fellow who's worked for the State Department for 3 decades. I'm trying to find his name right now. It's Stephen Pacinic.
Oh yeah, Pacinic. Yep.
Pacinic. And according to Pacinic, who should know, because he's one of the top experts at the State Department on matters to do with terrorism. He says bin Laden died in 2002 of a connective tissue disease, and that the whole bin Laden story is a false flag. And that was pretty much what Phil Marshall was saying as well.
Yeah, I agree too. What do you think? What do you think, Greg, on that?
That whole raid was staged, and then when they killed off those SEALs, that it's just like, man, our government is really not our government, and really not the whole government. But I do hope that there are a lot of good people still in our government who do care about our rights and do want to stop all of these false flags that are going on. It's crazy.
Exactly.
Yes, I agree. The research also shows between December 2001 and sometime in 2002 was more than likely when Osama bin Laden died. Anyway, it had nothing to do with 2011 a raid in May at a complex. Next question for you, Eric. The film makes it seem like Marshall sent his wife to Turkey that weekend, but we know that's now not the case. What do you think about the claim that Shawnee was not supposed to go to Turkey that weekend, but Marshall and another business partner were set to go to Istanbul a week later?
That's something that I have no knowledge of. As far as I know, she was in Turkey setting up an import-export business that Marshall encouraged her to take on to support herself, because they were within, I guess, weeks of their divorce being final. Anything I don't have anything of value to add to that question.
Okay. How about you, Greg? Anything?
That's what somebody told us. So I mean, it's really well, we have to either take his word for it, or just say, well, this is what this person said. We were told that Philip Marshall and his wife and a third person were all going to go to Turkey, and that Sean's trip was not planned. Whether that's true or not, I don't really, I can't really say too. But I think it does raise more questions, and it's like the more that we look into this case, the more that we see things that we used to think were unthinkable, and now that's not the case. I mean, how do we get here to where this person was accused of killing his two kids? I mean, that's serious business. Even if you're trying to cover it up and trying to create this whole framing, sometimes I'm speechless. The more that I watch that movie, it just raises more and more questions. But it's like, why can't they see it? Why can't the average person just see this, or why can't these cops see this? They have to know that there's a big cover up. I mean, family has to know too, right?
I would think, and I would imagine that Sean taking the position that her husband actually did kill his two kids and himself, maybe based in the fear of running into somebody in a dark alley herself.
Definitely.
It's hard to say.
Mm-hmm.
But if you have people like John Brennan and Prince Bandar, who is the head of Saudi intelligence, pissed off at you, they command a lot of resources. It's not beyond the realm of possibility that they could arrange to have a couple of guys or one guy get into that house with a silenced automatic and maybe some chloroform. We don't know about that, but it's certainly something that they're quite familiar with.
Yeah, but why his kids though? Why kill his children?
I don't know.
I know.
I don't know.
It's so sad. It's so sad.
Yeah. Wayne's speculation is that the hit was arranged, and that whoever was coming in the house didn't expect to find the kids there. That they were there by chance somehow.
Yeah, that's correct. From the chat logs that I released with a close friend of the family a couple of months ago, does reflect that the instant message chat that I had with this person said that the three of them were supposed to go to Istanbul, I believe 10 days after the date of the killings, and Shawnee, the estranged wife at the time, said it was important that she go out there, kind of right then and there, just by herself. So it did come up out of the blue, which resulted in the children being at his home that weekend, and her dog also. So that could have been a last minute thing, and which resulted in the kids being there inadvertently because of that. So, but
right.
yeah. In the film, Eric, one of the kids finds the bodies. One of the students, one of the friends. The official reports state that more than one kid found the bodies. Why was there only one kid finding the bodies in the film, or was this just easier for storytelling purposes for the film?
I tried to get 4 kids, believe me.
Wow.
I did, and it's hard to get kids during school to take time off to be in a movie, and I felt we were very fortunate to get Shannon Churchwell and Rochelle Henry and Shade Streeter, who played Mike, the boy that finds the bodies, with the next door neighbor, who is played by Michael Pizantz, the character Woody Green.
He was great.
He's really a great character. I love Michael. and he was really well suited for the role. But that was it. I just, I talked to a bunch of kids. I was looking for skateboarders, and really wanted to give it as much as we possibly could. But we made the film for practically nothing.
Wow.
So what we got was Shade and his bike and his excellent acting ability. So we do stray from the facts in a number of ways. The two agents, for instance, we know that Marshall was looking over his shoulder as a sort of a chronic habit in his life at that time. He was worried about being followed. He was worried about people. He was worried about his own safety, which was the reason that he went out and bought ammunition for his Glock. He spoke to a number of his neighbors about his feelings of not being safe, but we pretty much came up with the idea of the two agents sort of independent of the facts, because they made it easier to tell to dramatize the story.
Oh, very good, very good. In the film, the neighbor of Marshall calls the police, and they do not respond for 18 hours. An entire night passes before police show up the next morning. Yet that night, someone with a flashlight is seen in the Marshall residence. It's revealed that the person with the flashlight is the friend of Alex Marshall, and the friend takes pictures of the crime scene. How accurate is that 18-hour response by police and the pictures being taken by the teenage friend?
Well, we know that it's factual that Alex and Michaelia's friends from school came by the house after school on Friday. And we also know that the police didn't show up until somewhere around 2 o'clock in the afternoon on Saturday. So I took some poetic license in putting these kinds of things together. Yes, there was a big delay. I can't tell you if the bodies were actually discovered on Friday by the four kids, or they were discovered later when the police arrived on Saturday. But in terms of dramatic structure, it didn't seem to be too great a leap to portray the police as taking that long a time when they were so quick to rush to the conclusion that it was a murder-suicide rather than a murder.
Yeah, I agree. I like how it was done in the film, where it did show lackadaisical response at the same time, jumping quickly to the conclusion with the so-called result, and I like the way that was done. But that would be key to hear directly from those four, or who it was that were the eyewitnesses. Both of the children were well liked and had many friends and were very popular. So they might be or might have been intimidated, but sooner or later there's going to be a handful or one or two of them that want to break the silence. I believe.
Mm-hmm.
I think that the film was done real well in showing that intimidation factor by the authorities. Eric, in the film, two NSA agents, also the hitmen, go to the Marshall residence Thursday night, the last night any of them were seen. What information was that based on?
The two agents go to the house in the afternoon looking for what they state is a highly classified photograph. Now we know from Wayne's investigation that the house was searched numerous times. Marshall's research materials were taken. His computers were taken. Anything that he had which would have provided a record of the book that he was working on, all that stuff disappeared. So, it's entirely factual that he may that the murder could logically have happened as a result of, official people looking for something that would have embarrassed the government or an agency or someone in an agency. So, with these guys who were fictional characters, they come looking for a highly classified photograph, and that pretty much launches, the whole unfolding of the killing and the story that follows, all the way up to the end with, I don't want to give it away, but the photograph, never does get back into the hands of the government agents. They're still looking for it at the end.
Yeah, that was good. I did like the way the film ended that way. Also, personally, I like the scene where Wayne Madsen asks, the Wayne Madsen character asks, "I'd like to see the body," and Sergeant DeWitt responds with, "Yeah, I'd like to meet the Pope." Can you expand on that a little bit?
Oh, just having fun there.
In one scene, Marshall gives his son a small glass of wine and tells him everything should be done in moderation. As we know, the kids were found with some alcohol in their blood from the toxicology. Can you expand a little bit on that as well?
Well, that's based on the sheriff's report of the kids having alcohol in their bloodstream. We had it was kind of well, I shouldn't tell you this, but the day we were going to shoot that scene, Rochelle Henry's grandparents called and said she had strep throat and couldn't work. So we were left with 2 actors, a dog, and no one to play the girl. The scene we had written involved her quite a bit. So, being a creative director, I asked my wife to go sit on the couch and pull the blanket over her head. And the way the scene starts out, Randall Paul, who plays Philip Marshall, asks his son, who's at the kitchen counter with him, "What's with your sister?" And Shannon says, "Oh, she's a girl." And then they go on and they improvise the scene, between the 2 of them, rather than having to wait for the actress to get well. We didn't know when we were going to see her again.
I see. Okay, that makes sense. Was there any contact with Shawnee, the wife, to be as far as any background details, or even Phil's first wife, Anne Kallenauer?
No, I never spoke with Anne. I did speak with Shawnee, and she was, very apprehensive about the film. She was afraid that, that we were going to represent the side of the story that she didn't believe in, or that, she said she didn't believe was the truth. I told her that we were presenting the story pretty much factually from both sides. So, depending whichever side of the fence you're on, you'll be supported. And it's, it's I think true to the facts, because what we have is Philip Marshall looking for threads and evidence that the police say aren't there and don't exist and are conspiracy theories. So Wayne Madsen is convinced, as you may have understood from me earlier, that that it was a professional hit. I'd say that Neither side seems to have any conclusive evidence. Both sides are based on, I hate to use the word speculation, but that's really all there is, because the police forensics didn't amount to much. They didn't do, or if they did do, a detailed toxicology, a powder burns report, or any of the other things that might have, a ballistics report. None of those reports have been released. So, to say the least, it's very suspicious.
As far as preparing the film, were you able to interview anyone at the Calaveras County Sheriff's Department?
No, didn't want to.
Okay, very good. Because my next question from a listener was, if so, how cooperative were they? That answers that. Good luck. We figured that much. Greg, do you have any other follow-up questions for Eric?
Yeah, I have a couple questions about the cast. How did the cast feel about your story and about them, playing these parts that are very controversial, I guess, to some people?
Well, Portland is a pretty progressive place, and generally actors, especially good actors, are very intelligent people who are well read, and I never heard a single word from any of the cast, wanting me to tone anything down or revise anything based on any reluctance they might have had. Everyone was 100% into the story and into the characters they played, and that's a lot of people. We had nearly 30 speaking roles. So
yeah, that was some really really great casting. The guy who played, you said his name was Randall Paul, is that his name? Who played Philip Marshall?
Yes.
Yes. There was one, I saw one comment that wondered why he didn't shave his head for that part. Was there ever any talk about him shaving his head for that?
Well, nobody got paid. We're still waiting for, if by great fortune enough people rent or buy the film on Vimeo, there may be a payday in the future, but so far, none of the actors was paid. So God bless them. I'm not going to ask an unpaid fellow who has worked with Stanley Kubrick in Eyes Wide Shut with Tom Cruise.
Oh wow!
To shave his head, for a 4-day part that he's not getting paid for. So
yeah, he was great. He was a great actor in that.
He's a good actor.
He was in Eyes Wide Shut.
Yes.
I wonder if he has any stories about that. That must have been interesting.
Oh yeah, he can tell you. He can tell you about Kubrick making him do 50 takes. Him and Tom Cruise, they had to climb a set of stairs 50 times. And then he used the first take.
Oh, great. Do you have those same type of methods when you're making a film?
Me, no.
No.
No way.
Just a couple takes and that's it.
Well, I trust the actors. I like to, my background is a combination of feature films and documentaries. We shot this film pretty much like a documentary. I mean, our crew was 3 people, so we had 6 times more people in front of the camera than behind the camera, which is usually not the way it works. But everyone really stepped up to the plate. They knew their characters well, and they really delivered. So I think there was one scene I did 12 takes, which is the scene of Marshall's wife when she comes home refusing to talk to the Wayne Madsen character.
Oh, yeah, very tense scene. Very tense.
That was a tough one, but Dionne Jennings is the actress's name. She really delivered.
Are there any scenes that didn't make it into the film?
Well, pretty much everything made it into the film in one way or another. Actually, oh no, that's right. We had two scenes. We had a gal who played a TV news interviewer who interviewed the Marshall character in the beginning and the Madsen character in the end. And the tone of the scenes was just not serious enough to really support the gravity of the film. And when I threw those out, at that point, I went out and found all the the TV interviews that we wound up using of Kevin Barrett and Alex Jones and Phil Marshall himself.
Now you have in that film you have a different title for his book. It looks like very similar to Philip Marshall's False Flag 911 book. Did you have to have that
Right.
book like specially made, or how does that work?
Well, I have a Photoshop, so and I
Just
had a paperback book handy, so I made a new cover and pasted it on.
very cool. Was that filmed in a library or?
It was filmed. We have in Portland. There's a very cool little village called Multnomah Village that had a perfect look, I thought, or as close as we could get, without going to Murphy's itself. It had a very small, laid back kind of ambiance that seemed to work for the film to me. And Judy Blume's book is one of the stories in Multnomah Village, although it was supposed to be New York. We shot in a couple of bars there, and Judy Blume's, and on the street.
Yeah, that actually does look a lot like Main Street in Murphy's. It's very, very similar.
Cool.
Yeah. The golf course too was very similar. I don't think the golf course was as close, but it was almost in Phil Marshall's backyard. That was
Well,
pretty
I know
cool.
it was open. It was Phil Marshall was on a more of a hillside,
Right.
right?
Right, but
Yeah.
about two houses down was the golf course. You could actually
Oh, no
see it from
kidding.
yeah, so
Oh,
that
okay.
was pretty
I
pretty
didn't
cool.
know that. Yeah, that was really a stroke of luck finding that house and the house across the street. I had the sense that finding that house was a sign that sort of a sign that our film was meant to happen because it belonged to a fellow named Bob Buffalo Yapple, who had died in the house a month before we shot there. He had made his next door neighbor the executor of his estate, and they let us shoot, the film as a sort of a memorial to Mr. Yapple, who was a grizzly old guy who went out in buffalo robes hunting buffalo.
Oh, very good. Any other questions, Greg, for Mr. Stacey?
Maybe just one more. I mean, I know we're
Yeah,
holding him over a little bit here, but
that's okay. Go ahead.
I just wanted to know if you've read any of Philip Marshall's books and what you think about what our government told us about 911.
Oh well, I've read them all. I've been working on a project about Iran Contra drug smuggling that I've been trying to get off the ground for 12 years. I was actually working with a woman named Barbara Honegger, who you may have heard of. She had volunteered to take this Iran Contra story to some friends in Canada for financing. And it was about that time that the Philip Marshall story broke. And she was the one who told me about it. So, yes, you know what? I don't think that our government is corrupt. I think that neoconservative Republican capitalism has corrupted our government to the point where not only can't we get anything done, but the intelligence community has a stranglehold on pretty much every branch of government, especially the judicial. So they make it very, it's a few people in the intelligence community, the Bushes, the Rumsfelds, the Cheneys, the Brennans. They're not America. They are not the United States of America. They are not the voices of democracy or freedom. They are the corruptors of democracy and freedom. And I don't know how we get them out, but if we don't get them out, things are not going to get any better. And there will be more Philip Marshalls to deal with in the future.
Well, I'm really glad that you made this film, and I hope that everybody goes and watches this film. Go rent it, go buy it, purchase it, because this is a great film, and Eric Stacey put a lot of work into this film, a lot of work, and it's taken a big risk by even making this film that talks about 911. But I think as we go on, I think at least the people that I've spoken with, many people now don't feel as comfortable talking about 911, but they're more comfortable talking about how our government lied about us on 911. Do you have any thoughts on Building 7?
Well, all I know about Building 7 is that it shouldn't have come down. It came down, 7 hours after the Twin Towers came down. It was barely on fire. It housed oh gosh,
the CIA, the IRS, I think.
Yeah, a lot of sensitive departments, and there may have been, there's a lot of talk about gold that was stored under Building 7 and the Twin Towers. There's just so many facets to the story that need to be investigated, and hopefully someday we'll find a way to get past speculation and find out the truth.
Excellent. Well, I want to thank you for the time, Eric, and it's the movie Unthinkable, an airline captain's story. Can you give the listeners, Eric, also the website address where they can go to this website?
Well, the film website is unthinkable-movie.com. And if you watch the trailer there, it'll take you to Vimeo.com on demand 13692, which is the full feature.
Perfect. And we'll have a link to it also on our Facebook page. Our Facebook group page is called Justice for Philip, Alex, and Michaela Marshall, and that's available there on Facebook. So once again, thank you for the film. Well done, excellent.
Very cool. Well, thanks for your interest, Dan. Been nice talking to you and Greg.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much for all you do.
We really appreciate you and all of your hard work.
Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you. For Greg Fernandez Jr., this is Dan Hennon. Thanks again for your time, Mr. Stacey.
Happy birthday, Dan.
you too, Eric.
Okay.
All right, thank you.
Bye-bye, pal.